Vice President JD Vance tried to shame Winter Olympians who are using their current position on the world stage to advocate for marginalized groups facing brutal oppression in the United States. JD Vance said it's not the time for Winter Olympians to, quote, pop off about politics. But that ignores the reality that the Olympics have always been political and have always been a place for political protest, whether governing bodies and governments themselves like it or not. Several Americans competing in the Winter Olympics in Milan have used the opportunity to talk about what's happening politically in the US, to the extreme dismay and disapproval of President Trump, JD Vance, and other conservatives. They're saying that now isn't the time for politics, but that ignores the long history of athletes using these events as a form of protest. And whether the committees in charge of the Olympics like it or not, these athletes are using their time in the spotlight to do what they think is right. Time magazine compiled a timeline of notable moments of protest throughout Olympics history, starting in 1906. At the time, Irish track and field athlete Peter O'Connor was one of the first individuals to use this as a moment for protest. Time magazine wrote, in 1906, O'Connor entered the Games to represent Ireland. New rules implemented later that year only allowed athletes nominated by an Olympic committee to compete. Because Ireland did not have a committee at the time, the British Olympic Council claimed O'Connor as their own. But when he, a proud Irishman, found out he would be competing for Great Britain, he was outraged. In protest, he scaled a 20-foot flagpole in the stadium and waved a green flag with the words Ireland forever. Even though Olympic officials were upset about this, O'Connor wasn't expelled. He competed 2 days later and he won gold in 3 competitions. After each win, he waved his flag. And that was the first of many times that Olympic winners used that position to advocate for causes they knew were right. In 1968, John Carlos and Tommy Smith raised their fists on the podium in a Black Power salute. This was just a few months after Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated and racial tensions in the US were at an all-time high. But this act of protest actually destroyed their careers. Time magazine wrote that millions of Americans were outraged, they were kicked out of the Olympic Village, suspended from the US team, and sent home. But years later, in 2016, Carlos told the New York Times they didn't regret it and that they were proud of what we did. They never let us forget that we were wrong, Smith added. We were not wrong. We were only ahead of our time. A few years later, a Czechoslovakian gymnast took a stance against Russia's Soviet regime, turning her head away from the Soviet flag during the medal ceremony. In 1980, the US president at the time, President Carter, announced that Americans would be boycotting the Olympics in Moscow altogether. In 2004, an Iranian world judo champion refused to fight his Israeli opponent. And Freedom Forum compiled a list of American athletes who, quote, have flexed their First Amendment muscles both on and off the field of competition. A lot of these athletes were fighting against issues like racial segregation and discrimination of LGBTQ people, which, interestingly enough, are some of the same issues they're talking about today. Americans competing at the Winter Olympics are talking about things like ICE's brutal occupation of Minnesota, where some of them are actually from and can speak to the conditions on the ground. Others are raising awareness about things marginalized communities are experiencing in the United States right now, issues of discrimination and state violence. For example, here's USA curler Rick Ruohonen talking about what's happening in Minneapolis.
First of all, I'd like to say I'm proud to be here to represent Team USA and to represent our country. But we'd be remiss if we didn't at least mention what's going on in Minnesota and what a tough time it's been for everybody. This stuff is happening right around where we live. And I am a lawyer, as you know, and we do we have a constitution, and it allows us to freedom of the press and freedom of speech, protects us from unreasonable searches and seizures, and makes it that we have to, have probable cause to be pulled over. And what's happening in Minnesota is wrong. There's no shades of gray. It's clear. And I really love what's been happening there now with people coming out, showing the love, the compassion, integrity, and respect for others that they don't know and helping them out. And we love Minnesota for that.
Not only is this a powerful message in support of his fellow Americans, but it's worth noting that people in these communities for these sports online are very supportive of what these athletes are saying. In the Reddit forum for curling, these are some of the top replies to this clip. This person said, "Fantastic. The more we hear from US athletes of a variety of ages and across disciplines, the more absurd will be the right's denunciations. These athletes do love their country. It is because they love their country that they must speak." This person added, "The more that speak up, the more it snowballs to people using their own voice. And these voices have been quiet for a few years now. This is so important and amazing." This person said, "Lots of respect for him for speaking out. We're with you here in Canada, Rich." So even in this moment where countries are competing with each other for gold medals, you actually have international cooperation and support around this issue of speaking out against ICE. And that's no surprise because even people in the ground in Milan have been protesting ICE. Ruohonen isn't the only athlete speaking out. Here's what USA freestyle skiers Hunter Hess and Christopher Lillis had to say during a press conference of their own.
It brings up mixed emotions to represent the U.S. right now, I think. It's a little hard. There's obviously a lot going on that I'm not the biggest fan of, and I think a lot of people aren't. I think for me, it's more I'm representing my friends and family back home, the people that represent it before me, all the things that I believe are good about the U.S. I just think if it aligns with my moral values, I feel like I'm representing it. Just because I'm wearing the flag doesn't mean I represent everything that's going on in the U.S. So yeah, I just kind of want to do it for my friends and my family and the people that support me getting here.
As athletes, we're proud to represent our country. I love the USA, and I think I would never want to represent a different country in the Olympics. With that being said, a lot of times athletes are hesitant to talk about political views and how we feel about things. I feel heartbroken about what's happened in the United States when, I'm pretty sure you're referencing ICE and some of the protests and things like that. I think that as a country, we need to focus on respecting everybody's rights and making sure that we're treating our citizens as well as anybody with love and respect. And I hope that when people look at athletes compete in the Olympics, they realize that that's the America that we're trying to represent.
Again, what these US Olympians are saying isn't divisive. It's actually about bringing people together and supporting their fellow Americans. But it's no surprise that Christopher Lillis said athletes are typically reluctant to speak out because of exactly what happened next. The president of the United States lashed out against these Olympians on social media just for daring to use their own free speech. Trump called Hunter Hess a, quote, real loser, and said he shouldn't have tried out for the team, and it's too bad he's on it. Very hard to root for someone like this. Make America great again. Another member of the Trump administration, Rich Grinnell, said on social media that Hess should move to Canada if you aren't proud to wear USA. Tennessee Representative Tim Burchett, who's also a Republican, said Hess should shut up and go play in the snow. And then you have conservative-leaning influencers like Jake Paul, who tweeted, "From all true Americans, if you don't want to represent this country, go live somewhere else." Granted, out of all people, I hope that Hess doesn't let Jake Paul's words puncture him, because Jake Paul said a similar thing about Bad Bunny during his halftime show performance, and he had to walk those comments back less than 12 hours later. And this is how Hess responded to all of this backlash from the Trump administration and its allies on Instagram. He wrote, "I love my country. There is so much that is great about America, but there are always things that could be better. One of the many things that makes this country so amazing is that we have the right and the freedom to point that out. The best part of the Olympics is that it brings people together. And when so many of us are divided, we need that now more than ever. I cannot wait to represent Team USA next week when I compete. Thanks to everyone for their support." And again, the top comments on this post were overwhelmingly supportive. The top comment reads, "You can love your country and still call out your government. Both can exist. We love you for telling the truth, and no one gets to dim your success. Let's go. This comment says, "You are so brave. What is going on in America is absolutely abhorrent and un American. You stand on the shoulders of Jesse Owens, Muhammad Ali, Jackie Robinson, and so many others who dared speak truth to power in the moment. Don't listen to these people who will never be on the right side of history, especially that one man." It's worth pointing out that what these athletes are saying and doing is ultimately more American and more true to our values as a country than what Trump, his allies, and other members of his administration are doing. They're punching down with these low blows that are totally disrespectful and actually embarrassing for our country on the world stage. People around the world are looking up to the dignity, grace, and selflessness of these athletes, not the people currently leading our country right now. Not to mention, because of everything that's happening in the country under Trump, a lot of these athletes are being asked directly for their thoughts on his administration. For example, figure skater Amber Glenn was asked directly about Trump's approach to the LGBT community. And here's what she had to say.
It's been a hard time for the community overall under this administration. It isn't the first time that we've had to come together as a community and try and fight for our human rights. And now, especially, it's not just affecting the queer community, but many other communities. And I think that we are able to support each other in a way that we didn't have to before. And because of that, it's made us a lot stronger. I hope I can use my platform and my voice throughout these games to try and encourage people to stay strong in these hard times. I know that a lot of people say, you're just an athlete, like stick to your job, shut up about politics, but politics affect us all. It is something that I will not just be quiet about because it is something that affects us in our everyday lives. So, of course, there are things that I disagree with, but as a community, we are strong and we support each other, and brighter days are ahead of us.
After making this statement, Amber wrote on her Instagram story, "When I chose to utilize one of the amazing things about the United States of America, freedom of speech, to convey how I feel as an athlete competing for Team USA in a troubling time for many Americans, I am now receiving a scary amount of hate/threats for simply using my voice when asked about how I feel. I did anticipate this, but I am disappointed by it. I will be limiting my time on social media for my own well-being for now, but I will never stop using my voice for what I believe in." And yet again, the comments on the figure skating Reddit community are very positive and supportive of Amber Glenn. The top comment says, "I'm proud of her for saying what she felt, and proud of her for stepping away from the noise of the internet right now. Her focus is meant for the amazing opportunity before her this week, and no matter where Amber places, just being on that ice in Milan is an amazing accomplishment. Nobody can negate the fact that she's competing in the Olympics, which means she's a certified badass." The next comment says, "This is the America I'm rooting for this week." And this one says, "Amber, if you ever read this, just know a lot of people feel the same as you do, and they're most likely grateful for you speaking up for those who can't. Don't let the haters get to you and drag you down. What you said is a truth that needed to be said. For now, focus on what is best for you and enjoy the amazing experience of being an Olympian and everything that comes with it, and be proud of your accomplishments." These are the types of supportive messages coming from everyday people who agree with what these athletes have to say. And it stands in sharp contrast to what JD Vance said when he was asked about the athletes' statements.
Look, I had a great time at the Olympics, and I think the media made much ado about nothing with the fact that, yes, in a crowd of 30,000 people, there were certainly some people who disagreed with my policies or the policies of the administration. But I felt like the people of Milan were great. Certainly Prime Minister Maloney and I had a great meeting. But the Olympic athletes were unbelievable, and I know the entire country is rooting for them. Yes, you're going to have some Olympic athletes who pop off about politics. I feel like that happens every Olympics. My advice to them would be to try to bring the country together. And when you're representing the country, you're representing Democrats and Republicans. You're there to play a sport, and you're there to represent your country and hopefully win a medal. You're not there to pop off about politics. So when Olympic athletes enter the political arena, they should expect some pushback. But most Olympic athletes, whatever their politics, are doing a great job, are certainly enjoy the support of the entire country. And I think recognize that the way to bring the country together is not to show up in a foreign country and attack the President of the United States, but it's to play your sport and represent the country well.
There are several ironic and telling things about that statement. First of all, I find it interesting that JD Vance is using slang terms like pop off and popping off, which are rooted in AAVE, which is African American Vernacular English. He's borrowing slang terms from the Black community while the administration he's a part of is directly discriminating against this community. So I just find that pretty hypocritical and important to note. Also, what JD Vance is saying here is that athletes representing the US should essentially just shut up about politics so that they don't piss anyone off on either side of the aisle. That's what will bring Americans together. But as we can see from all of these supportive comments, what's actually bringing Americans together is pointing out the reality of what's happening in the United States because of Donald Trump's administration. That's also why people in the stands were booing JD Vance when they saw him, because of what he represents and how bad it is for not just America, but the world. And finally, when JD Vance says that the right way to respect America is to represent both sides of the aisle, has he ever considered taking that advice himself? Because the way that he and Donald Trump act is incredibly divisive and repeatedly mischaracterizes, undermines, and attacks the entire left wing side of the country. So, if JD Vance really feels this way, he's certainly not acting about it in his official capacity as vice president. These athletes show a lot more respect, dignity, and grace than the people currently running the country. That's why people are more likely to support these athletes in speaking out than they are going to support anything JD Vance has to say.